Okay, friends, here we are. Chef Joaquin.
Okay,
What are you going to teach them how to make?
Tortillas.
Okay, here,
need
show them one.
3 things to make tortillas.
Okay, what are the 3 things?
Masa harina,
Yes.
some water, and then salt.
And you mix those together?
Yeah, and you make a ball,
Okay.
and then you put some water, and then you put it in this thing that makes it flat.
Okay.
Like this. And then after you do that, but you need the rule is you need to have a taste of it and put it on butter. This is a dinosaur. One time in outer space, the rock came flying down out of outer space onto the dinosaurs, and that's how the dinosaurs died.
So we got a little bit of cooking and a little bit of science in there. All right, we'll check in with you guys later. All right, I'm very excited for today's lesson. A lot of special visual effects that I added into here. So let's get started so I can show off all my skills. You should have already done task 1, task 2, task 3, task 4, a guided reading, and a check for understanding. If you have not done those things, you need to complete those as soon as possible because now we're on to task 5. We're almost done with this portion of the Cold War. We'll have a quiz coming up soon, so you need to make sure you've completed these tasks so you get credit for the hard work that you've done. Here's our aim for today. This is the 6th aim of our Cold War unit. How did the policy of brinkmanship contribute to the arms race between the United States and Soviet Union during the Cold War? Now, we have already talked about arms races before. It's not 2 arms detached from someone's body racing across the room to get to the other side. When we're talking about arms, we're talking about weapons. That's the race that's happening in this case. Brinkmanship is a new term for you, and you already know about the Cold War. It's the tension, the standoff between the Soviet Union and the United States. Although they did not fight each other directly, they were ready to, and there was a lot of indirect conflict that happened. Let's take a look at this political cartoon for our warm-up. What is the message of the political cartoon below? What do you see? What can you infer? So let's start with some objects that we see here in the cartoon. There are 2 guillotines which are labeled. You should remember the guillotine from our French Revolution unit. Guillotine is a device used to cut off someone's head, much like a very, very fast, very, very sharp and efficient knife. Now, looking down below that, I see 2 people below the guillotines, and both of them are looking at each other, sort of in this stare down with these angry faces. Since I know this is part of the Cold War unit, we can infer or maybe assume that one of these represents the United States and the other of these represents the Soviet Union. So these are the 2 sides. They are acting hostile toward one another. They are no longer friends. Although they used to be allies during World War II, now they are enemies in the Cold War. Now, we're going to look closer at what these 2 people are doing. So, if you look at the 2 people who are making these faces, you'll notice you can see a fist, and each of them have a fist that is holding on to a rope, right? So, what is going to happen here? They're both holding each other's guillotine rope. So if one of them lets go of the rope in order to kill the other person, what's going to happen to them? Let's take a look. So let's suppose the United States lets go of its rope. The rope is free, the guillotine drops, cuts off the Soviet Union's head. The Soviet Union is now dead. However, when the Soviet Union sees that the United States let go of their rope, probably going to let go of the rope they're holding onto. Or even if they don't, as their head's getting cut off, they're going to let go. And that is then going to drop the guillotine on the United States, cutting off their head. So if either country lets go of their rope, either country attacks the other, both countries will be dead rather than only killing your opponent. Let's get into our vocabulary and then we'll come back to that cartoon in a moment. So, we've already talked about an arms race when we did our World War I unit. Competition between countries, essentially for more and better weapons. More guns, more bombs, more tanks, more planes, faster tanks, stronger planes, etc. New term for today, proliferation. Important idea from this lesson is nuclear proliferation. Proliferation means to increase quickly, but it particularly refers to the spread of nuclear weapons. Increase in the amount of nuclear weapons a country has or that all the countries have. Brinkmanship. Threatening to go to war in response to enemy aggression. So we know it's an arms race. Countries competing, probably the Soviet Union and the United States. We know that they have nuclear weapons that are proliferating, that are spreading quickly. Then, with those weapons, they're following this policy of brinkmanship, where they're saying, if you do anything to us, the slightest thing, we will completely destroy you with our nuclear weapons. We will go to war over anything. You need to also know brinkmanship. Sometimes you'll see it written as brinksmanship. Same term. Last one. Mutual assured destruction. Military strategy in which the use of weapons of mass destruction by two or more opposing sides would cause the complete destruction of both the attacker and the defender. So you end up with ultimately both sides completely destroying each other or being dead, which takes us back to the cartoon. So we talked about the message there being that if one country lets go of their guillotine rope, the other one will also, and they'll both be dead. Let's add one more observation to this. If you look behind these two individuals, both have missiles in the background. So it's not that the United States and the Soviet Union actually had guillotines. The guillotines are supposed to represent their military, their weapons, their nuclear missiles that they both have pointed at each other, ready to go in case anything goes wrong. So let's see what happens. United States launches an attack, Soviet Union launches one back, both countries end up dead. This is an example of many of the terms. So the warm-up question here says, which vocabulary term is this political cartoon an example of? Proliferation? Well, certainly nuclear weapons spread in order for these two countries to be able to attack each other. Brinkmanship, where they're both threatening to, if you do anything, you let go of your rope, I'm going to let go of mine. You launch your missiles, I'm going to launch mine. Arms race, certainly they're both trying to keep up with each other in how many nuclear weapons they're accumulating, and it's definitely mutual assured destruction. If you destroy my country, be assured I will completely destroy your country as well. All right, moving on with another example, building out this topic. Two people who are in a fight. Person A comes to that fight with a knife. Person B shows up with a gun. What will person A do? Now, when we talk about this in class, someone always says, first, someone will sometimes say, come back with a bigger knife. No, wrong. Or, come back with a gun. Okay, yes, but then you just have the same weapon. This is an arms race. So, person A leaves, and they come back with a machine gun. So, what will person B do? Person B is now going to leave with their gun. They are going to come back and bring with them a tank. Then person A has to decide, well, what do I do now? I've only got a machine gun, they've got a tank. So person A leaves. Person A is going to come back with a nuclear bomb. What's person B going to do? Well, you can't get any bigger than a nuclear bomb. So they are going to leave, and they are going to come back with their own nuclear bomb. If either of these countries attack each other now, or either of these people, person A, person B, attack each other, then it will completely destroy both countries. Mutual assured destruction as a result of an arms race, as a result of proliferation of weapons, and as a result of brinkmanship, threatening to go to all-out war in the event of any small act of aggression. All right, so the United States was the first country to develop nuclear weapons, and then the Soviet Union wanted to get in on this arms race, so they started developing their own. We always watch this video in class, and it's really interesting to watch the whole thing. We're only going to watch about a minute and a half of it today. You're going to see a map, and in the map you're going to see nuclear explosions occurring, and you'll see them happening as time goes on. So all narrates, you can see what's going on. The idea is I want you to see if you can keep track of how many nuclear explosions. So this is going to include all the tests of nuclear weapons and then the 2 times nuclear weapons have been used in war, which we already learned about, the 2 times the United States dropped atomic bombs on Japan to end World War II. Here we go. Can you keep track? All right, so it's 1945. The United States tests 1 nuclear weapon out in the desert. So that's 1 for the United States. They use 1 on Hiroshima, and they use 1 on Nagasaki to end the war. So far that's 3 nuclear explosions for the United States. Let's see if we can keep track. So that was 2 more in 1946. 3 more in 48. Oh no, now the Soviet Union's in. They've got 1, so it's 8-1. Wait, I missed that. Oh my gosh. Wait, this is going way too fast. I can't keep up. Are you keeping track? How many is that so far? How many explosions? Okay, good. It's at the top now. There's 51 for the U.S., 18 for the Soviet Union. Now Great Britain's getting in. They've got 3, 4, 5, 9. Okay. The United States is past 100. Soviets are past 50. Oh my gosh, it's only 1959. Okay, France is getting in now. France explodes a couple of tests. Okay, hundreds. This is getting crazy. This is too much testing. Think about all the damage that this is doing. Okay, China is getting involved now. Think about all the money spent testing out all these hundreds of nuclear weapons. We're going to stop it right about here. We only went to 1968. We only did about 20 years. There's another 2 minutes in this video that we're not going to watch. So at this point, the United States had tested more than 500. The Soviets were approaching 300 tests. France, 28. Great Britain, 26. China now is getting in on it. They have 7. If we kept watching the video, India would get on it. Pakistan would get in on this as well. And there are some other countries we'll talk about in a moment. So hundreds, thousands of nuclear tests happening. What are they doing, right? They're testing out to see, are their weapons the best weapons? They're testing out to see, can I scare my opponent by testing out the best weapons and letting them know how many weapons we are testing, right? It's this idea of mutual assured destruction. Let them know. Test out your weapons so they know that you are ready to completely destroy them if you have to. Here's how many weapons were built up by both the United States and the Soviet Union. So at its peak, the United States had more than 30,000 nuclear weapons ready to use. And the Soviet Union, at its peak, got all the way up to 40,000 nuclear weapons ready to use. So these are massive stockpiles, enough to destroy the entire Earth many, many, many times. But they never used them against each other because both sides know if they did, both sides would be completely destroyed, as well as probably the rest of the world. So officially, the United States tested 1,054 nuclear weapons from 1945 to 1992. Testing is no longer done by these major countries, although North Korea continues to test nuclear weapons. We'll talk about them in a moment. So we have more than 1,000 tests that happen in the United States to test out these weapons, right? And early on, when these weapons were being tested, people didn't know a lot about the effect, about radiation, etc. And you could go to places like Las Vegas, and you could watch, and hotels in Las Vegas would advertise that they had the best view of the bomb. You could go and watch the explosions being tested way out in the desert. Okay, so as time progresses, all these tests do pay off, and the countries get much, much better at their nuclear bomb technology. So this diagram shows the size of the explosion at Hiroshima there on the left-hand side, and then next to it's a test called Trinity. If you look at the graph, I'm going to circle part of it here. You see that little circle, that red circle I added? That's the Hiroshima bomb. That tiny little dot is what they're trying to show you in this diagram. That was a 15 kiloton explosion, right? Pretty small. Still killed hundreds of thousands of people. Then you get to the largest bomb ever tested. It's called the Tsar Bomba. The Soviet Union tested it. This is massive. This bomb, so large, the explosion was so large that the fireball was 5 miles wide. That's like the center of the explosion, right? Then the mushroom cloud that it produced as a result was 35 miles high. This is the largest bomb ever tested, incredibly destructive, and you saw in that previous slide just how much more destructive bombs have become. All right, so what? So you have these bombs, but they're in your country, and you've got to fly a plane to get them from one country to another. No longer is that the case. So countries have developed what are called intercontinental ballistic missiles, meaning that they can go from continent A to continent B and can travel across the entire ocean. And some of these ICBMs, as they're called, can travel up to 7,500 miles. This is a very long distance. And if a country is ever to use these, they're not just going to send one, right? They're probably going to send many. But let's look at a diagram again on how this would work. I promise some great visual effects here. So we've got a missile over in continent A. We're going to launch that missile over the ocean down to continent B, and it's going to completely destroy continent B. Continent B probably has its own weapons. It's going to fire back and destroy continent A. This is a diagram of just how destructive the Tsar Bomba would be if it was detonated, dropped on Midtown Manhattan. So you can see the red represents essentially within the red zone, everything would be just like completely destroyed within an instant. And you can see our school, WP, is actually within that zone, right? We're closer than, for example, further out distances. But you can see if you go further out, even out halfway out Long Island, right? All the way up into Connecticut, right? Way up upstate. Out into the suburbs, right? Everything would be destroyed as a result of the Tsar Bomba. So what did people do during the Cold War about this? The fear of total destruction hung over people throughout the Cold War. So people made fallout shelters. You've probably seen a sign like this. A fallout shelter is a place that you could go in the event of a nuclear attack. Now, the problem is, and this is going to be similar to the problem that people dealt with during the bombing of London, during the London Blitz, aka Battle of Britain, right, is you've got to get somewhere quickly enough in order to survive. But it's different that after a nuclear bomb is set off, there's nothing. Everything is completely destroyed above ground. So you'd have to stay in a fallout shelter for a long time, potentially years. So this photo is an example of what some people built in those fallout shelters. They would stock food in there with the expectation that they may have to live down there for months and months. Realistically, they probably would have to live down there for years or decades before it was safe to return, with how powerful the bombs are now. Growing up, the neighborhood I grew up in had a bomb shelter. It no longer was in use because the Cold War had ended by then. But it was there. It was built in order to get people to move to the neighborhood. They wanted to say, hey, we have a bomb shelter in our neighborhood, so if there's an attack, you could go live there and be safe. However, later, I think this speaks to how strong the shelter was. Maybe not in terms of how long you could live in it. You'd have to have a lot of food. But how strong the shelter was, they sold the property, and somebody tried to put a house on the property, and they could not destroy the bomb shelter. And the last time I walked by it years ago, like, they had started jackhammering a little corner of it, and then they realized there's no way we can destroy this. So they were very strong, but you'd have to stay down there for a very long time, which transitions to, if you've ever played or heard of the game Fallout, Fallout is based on this idea of a devastating nuclear war, and the player character comes out of an underground bomb shelter, underground bunker, and has to sort of survive in this new world that's been changed by nuclear destruction and radiation, etc. All right. Countries with nuclear weapons. These are all the countries that currently have nuclear weapons, the date that they tested them out, the number of tests conducted, and then their current total nuclear weapons. The United States still has more than 6,000 nuclear weapons. Russia has more than 6,000. Other countries measure in the hundreds, but as you saw with just how destructive they are, if you just have a few of them, just a few is enough to be very, very destructive. Some more recent issues would include, we'll point out that India developed nuclear weapons in order to protect itself against Pakistan, which Pakistan later developed nuclear weapons on its own. So that's a good example of proliferation and this arms race. Israel has nuclear weapons, but they have never officially acknowledged that they do. So they have done that to maintain safety against their neighbors around them who are hostile towards the country of Israel. North Korea is hostile towards most of the rest of the world, and they've developed weapons in order to be able to prevent South Korea or other countries from ever invading, to remove the dictatorship of North Korea, right? So it's something that acts as a deterrent, but also if any country was ever to use it, most of the world would be significantly affected. So this map shows the light blue are countries that have weapons and have acknowledged them and are part of an agreement to not, it's called the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which is ironic because it's the countries with the most. But basically they've agreed, we're not going to make too many, and we want to help other countries not make them. So if countries agree to not make their own nuclear weapons, all the gray countries, the idea is they're going to get some help from the light blue countries, economically, maybe politically, military help, so that they don't need to have weapons. Okay. The red are also countries that have weapons, but they haven't signed up for that non-proliferation agreement. Yellow is Israel, presumed to have weapons, and then the dark blue are countries that we have placed nuclear weapons in. So, for example, Italy, Turkey, Germany. The United States has placed weapons there because it's closer to Russia, for example, formerly the Soviet Union, so that we can hit them more quickly if we need to. And at one point, we'll talk about this after we do the quiz and we get into the next part of this Cold War. The Soviet Union places missiles in Cuba to get as close as they can to us. And then the green is countries that used to have nuclear weapons, and they were either part of the Soviet Union and they gave them back to the Soviet Union when the Soviet Union collapsed. They gave them back to Russia, I should say. And then South Africa had nuclear weapons at one point, and they agreed to give them up in order to get support from other countries. All right, so let's look at political cartoon. In this cartoon, The first thing I see is there's a label on the arm. It says arms race. Now, think about the context here, though. Although the arm is labeled arms race, we're not talking about an arm. We're talking about weapons, guns, bombs, etc. So as we move down here, I see that there is the Earth. The Earth is being held in a nutcracker, right? What is going to happen in this cartoon? What could the arms race do to the Earth? Let's look at a multiple choice question. I think this is going to be on our quiz. What is the main idea of this cartoon? A, the world's population is growing faster than its food supply. Does not seem to match. I didn't see anything about food. I guess they're trying to trick you with that one by the idea of a nutcracker. But there's nothing about population. The land masses of northern and southern hemispheres are shifting. Nothing about tectonic plates shifting. C, military technology is making the world a smaller place. Right? So if you take it literally, right, is it literally that the arms race is squeezing the Earth and making it smaller? Is the point of the nutcracker to squeeze the Earth to make it smaller? D, proliferation of military weapons could destroy the world, right? There's that key term. Weapons are spreading. It's arms race, nuclear proliferation, more and more weapons, better weapons. Eventually, this could destroy the whole world. All right, here's our task. So you will read an article, but you're just going to read one section of it. It's a section called the Cold War. So read that section called the Cold War. Your task is to address this question. Does nuclear proliferation, having all these weapons, actually increase our safety, or does this put us in greater danger? Here's how you're going to start. You're going to need to explain what is nuclear proliferation, and then take a stance. Do nuclear weapons make us more safe or less safe? Are we more safe because we have them and we know we're not going to be attacked? Or are we less safe because if anything goes wrong, if there's an accident, if someone accidentally sets one off, or if someone thinks they're being attacked, is it making us less safe that we have these and that we have so many of them? Cite some evidence from the text. Explain your evidence. Include the counterclaim, and of course, prove the counterclaim wrong. I hope that you are safe and healthy, working hard, and getting ready for our next quiz. Let's wrap this up so we can get back to finding out more about how those tortillas were. All right, how is the tortilla?
Yummy!
Yeah, can I get a bite of it? No? Just a little bite. Oh, that's all I get? Just that little piece. Let's see how it tastes. Pretty good. Good work. All right, let's say bye, friends.
Bye, friends, and everyone, what's your name?